As dawn breaks over Candlemarsh, 3 of our 5 party members awaken. Calla in her childhood bedroom, having had a comfortable sleep back at her home for the first time in a long time, Alistair in his slightly less comfortable bed in the inn, and Merrick in his bedroom, a former broom closet. Merrick was the first to descend to the bar area where Feyre was already up and about. Seeing him, she smiled and wordlessly disappeared into another area. As Merrick seated himself at the table, Alistair also came down, joining him there as Feyre emerged, carrying 3 bowls of some kind of vegetable soup. She placed them down. "Your friend not joining you?" They replied that Septima must not be up yet, so Feyre left her portion on the table and disappeared again momentarily, emerging with 3 tankards which she set down. "Swamp special brew is all we serve here," she informed them. Alistair carefully took a sip, the liquid having been watered down significantly and tasting a little more mulled. It did not have the same effect as the neat version consumed the previous evening, and he was confident that he wouldn't accidentally set anything on fire if he burped. Calla went through to the main living area of Candlewick Cottage. Meru was not there, but the table was laid with Calla's mug which contained some herbal tea. Nothing trippy about this one. There was a plate of delicious fungi and grubs. Kenku are a bird race after all, which Calla tucked into before heading to the Bog Inn to join the rest of her companions. She entered as Merrick and Alistair were finishing their meal and inquired about Septima before heading up to her bedroom. The inn was small and Calla had no trouble figuring out which room was Septima's. She knocked on the door and listened. Nothing. She called Septima's name. Still nothing. She turned the door handle, finding the door unlocked, and peeked in. The bed looked unslept in, most of Septima's possessions neatly placed beside it. Septima herself was nowhere to be seen, only the book which Calla recognised as being the one from the strange enchanted tower lying on the bed. She called out to the others and they came up to look. They assured her that they had not heard Septima leave and there had been no indications that she was planning to. Calla entered first, approaching the bed and picking up the book. It felt strangely warm to the touch, but was still completely blank. She tucked it safely into her bag, and Alistair scooped up the remaining possessions and stowed them inside his man-bag of holding. The group, once 5, were now 3. Rather than waiting for Septima, they decided to press on and head towards the corrupted tree to retrieve the arcane core that Alistair had been tasked with. It was time critical, after all. Whilst this was going on, Gera had been making his way through the marshland in search of gum and his newly acquired donkey, Boris. After a few hours of no success, he decided to rejoin the others. Gera was not unfamiliar with the area, having travelled through it in his younger adventuring days, but the landscape had changed somewhat over the years and he struggled to get his bearings. As night began to descend, he bedded down for the evening, surmising that by now Boris had probably eaten grizzle gum anyway. The following morning he woke, and continued in what he hoped was the direction of Candlemarsh. After a few hours of walking, he realised he had gone too far to the east and began to head back in a westerly direction. At the same time, the other 3 were making their way eastwards from Candlemarsh. Gera arrived first, noting the rickety-looking bridges connecting the areas of land not submersed in the stagnant swamp water. As he was busy investigating to ensure it could carry his weight, he failed to notice the troll that had been patrolling nearby. It hit out at him with a bite attack, followed by a vicious claw strike. Gera lashed back, wounding the troll. He did not notice that it was regenerating, the wounds inflicted healing up, as he was so focused on trying to stay alive. As the sole target, he absorbed 4 rounds of hard hits without going down, but without getting the troll down either, despite his blooming blade and thunderwave spells. The others arrived to spot Gera fighting with something huge on the southern part of the area they were in, and they could see he was badly hurt. Calla was the first to act, racing her full 30 feet to the centre of the longest bridge. She threw a healing word to Gera and cast Shillelagh on her staff. Alistair was able to use his movement and bonus action to dash 60 feet, getting him to the centre of the large island area, from where he shot a crossbow bolt into the troll. Gera, realising with relief that reinforcements had arrived, hacked at it once more with his sword. Merrick cast Hunter's Mark, firing an arrow from a safe distance. The troll continued to pummel Gera. Calla moved a bit closer, casting a flaming sphere and ramming it into the creature. Alistair used several charges from his Wand of Healing Word to aid Gera before hiding behind a tree. Gera slammed Dawnbreaker into the troll, noting movement in the trees near Alistair and calling out, whilst Merrick fired another arrow. This time the troll was unable to regenerate, angrily smashing at Gera. The flaming sphere slammed into it again, and the other three were able to inflict enough damage to knock it down. A second troll emerged from the undergrowth on the island, going straight for the nearest target, which was Alistair, biting and clawing the half-elf. Merrick moved his hunter's mark onto it and fired at it, as Calla used her thorn whip to pull it across to where it was within range of her flaming sphere. Gera charged across the bridge. Thankfully, it was well constructed enough to withstand his thunder wave. He launched an attack on the troll, followed by Alistair with 2 melee blows. The troll, angry at the fire but not intelligent enough to know where it was coming from, continued to attack the 2 men. It was a rinse and repeat over a couple of rounds until the flaming sphere wore the troll down, and it collapsed, dead and on fire. The combat over for now, Merrick took the chance to cast Cure Wounds on Gera whilst Calla investigated the troll she had smoked, and Alistair looked around the area. With a natural 1, all Calla could see was a body on fire. Alistair rolled better, able to tell that the trolls did not seem to live here, and it would be safe, at least for a short while. He and Gera decided to take a short rest. Calla joined them whilst Merrick investigated the other body and hunted for any of his arrows that may be recoverable. He was able to tell the creature was a troll, and Calla, being a native of the swamp, knew that they were vulnerable to fire. Merrick found parts of an arrow that had been destroyed by Gera's thunderwave. As they sat, Gera explained he had been unable to find Gum and asked where Septima was, since the last he knew she was still back in Silverhaven. He was told about her strange disappearance and agreed it was better to continue on rather than to look for her at the moment, especially after hearing how she had magically appeared in the middle of the camp on top of Merrick after he had left. Their short rest over, the group continued on with Calla leading the way. After maybe an hour more of walking, the landscape began to get a little less boggy. Calla was in an area she'd never been before, but it was certainly looking more familiar to Gera. It was nearing noon when the group found their path blocked by a fallen tree. Alistair flirted awkwardly with Calla, who seemed oblivious to his attempts. He told her how beautiful the swamp, her home, was. Whilst this was going on, Merrick had a look at the roots of the tree and could determine it had been fallen for a long time, the roots and trunk beginning to rot. He decided to try to climb it, and his acrobatics roll of 7 saw his foot placed on a particularly rotten area, going straight through. He managed to avoid taking any damage, except to his dignity. Alistair decided to try to get through near the top of the fallen tree where the branches were. He confidently walked up and began pushing the branches apart, his athletics roll of 3 seeing him bat ineffectually at them. Merrick fell into fits of laughter atop the tree as Gera took out his 2 hand axes and began to cleave through the trunk. Calla decided she would also try to clamber over it, her low roll seeing her going too close to where Gera was chopping and falling down onto the ground. Eventually, one way or another, they all got to the other side of the tree. They were now confronted by a stagnant river, narrow but unmoving. Alistair, hoping to redeem himself in Calla's eyes, snuck up to check for danger. Seeing none, he stepped confidently across the river. Or tried to. His dice had other ideas as he stepped into the water, sinking to the knee and pulling his foot out to find it covered in thick, green-brown sludge. Merrick was once again buckled with laughter. Calla, used to the swampland, crossed with ease, telling Alistair to watch out for darker areas as they tended to be boggy. Gera, clad in plate armour, leapt gazelle-like over the water, and Merrick used a giant mushroom as a springboard across. They could see the path to the south, but there was a large tree stump on their left which looked a little odd. Merrick, assisted by Calla, went to take a closer look. It was about 3 feet tall, and when he peered inside, Merrick estimated that it had been hollowed out to about 6 feet below ground level. It wasn't empty. A humanoid skeleton was curled up in the bottom. Gera strode over and looked in, surprised as he did not see what he had expected to. The skeleton had no weapons or armour, and appeared to be a finely boned humanoid rather than that of a strong, stocky human. He had no choice but to tell the others that he had been to this area before. Many years ago, back in his adventuring days, he had come to Candlemarsh with his comrade Caelan. A shadowworm dragon was terrorising the area, and they had come to hunt it. It was not easy to find, and indeed, it was it that found them, ambushing them as they camped out, waiting. They fought hard, Caelan succumbing to a poisoned bite from the creature. Gera managed to land the killing blow, but his friend was beyond saving. He buried Caelan here, along with his battle axe and armour, marking the grave with a stone. The others listened in silence as Gera relayed this, informing them that it looked very much as though something had dug its way out rather than in. He then began to walk around the tree. As he did so, a voice said, "I didn't expect to see you again." Gera straightened up, took a deep breath and turned. He saw Caelan standing before him, wearing his armour and wielding his weapons. He was not aggressive as he stepped out from the tree line. Gera was confused, unsure quite how to process what he was seeing. A tense conversation ensued, Caelan accusing Gera of leaving him to die, whilst Gera tried to explain that his memory was wrong. Alistair prayed silently to Korak, the god of war, as this was going on. Merrick used his primal sensibility, and a faint aura of undeath surrounded Caelan. Calla could see that he looked wrong somehow, his skin an odd colour and texture. Gera, standing closer, noted that Caelan had not aged as much as he had, and he appeared sallow. He asked Caelan the name of Gera's wife, and he replied, "Alara." Gera held out a hand, and as his former comrade took it, the skin was cold, dry. Gera pulled him into a hug, and Caelan whispered in his ear that he should watch out for her. Alistair moved over, weapons drawn, as Merrick notched an arrow, holding an attack. As Alistair looked at Caelan, he could feel his anger growing, then sweeping over him in an all-consuming rage. As the spirit of Korak filled him, he flew into a barbarian's rage, striking at Caelan, who retaliated. The others did not fight, but tried to reason with them both. Calla cast Entangle, holding Alistair in the strong, grasping vines, but failing to do more than slow Caelan. Yes, those bushes are representing the vines. At least it's not a badger this time, okay? Alistair took 2 more strikes at the fighter, who moved back. Calla moved in and tried to get through to Alistair. Her calming presence reminded him of his first love, Mead, a half-orc with whom he had grown up, and the rage disappeared. Gera suggested they leave, now, and ushered the others away. He ignored the taunts from Caelan as they all made a hasty retreat. There were questions to be answered, and even more to be asked.